Right. Good morning, everyone. This is Chair and Representative Kristen Bonner. I want to call the Legislative Commission on Cybersecurity to order. The time now is 10:38 a.m. on Tuesday, June 27th, 2023. We also need,
Monday, September 11th.
or no, I'm sorry, sorry, I'm reading the wrong one. It is Monday, September 11th, 2023, at 10:38. And we're going to call the Legislative Commission on Cybersecurity to order. The first order of business for today is the approval of the minutes, which are for June 27, 2023. Do we have any corrections to the minutes?
Do we need a quorum to approve the minutes?
We do have a quorum.
Oh, we do. Okay. Okay.
And just for the record, we do have a quorum in the room. Hearing no objections, we will go ahead and vote to approve the minutes. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, great. With the minutes approved, we will then go to discussion of the updated closed meeting procedures. I want to thank staff for working on diligently to help to revise those items so that we had something working that should have been sent out in your packet ahead of time, but there is a copy in your packet to kind of look at. Are there any questions, concerns, or anything around the Legislative Commission rules for closed meetings?
Look good.
Looks good.
All right. With that, we will go ahead and vote to approve the recommendations of staff. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. I think we've settled that. Fantastic. And then we will move on to some basic updates for today, and we'll just charge forward. I believe Representative Nash Representative Nash will not be able to make it today, and I know that we have Representative Lucero out, but hopefully Senator Zhang will join us shortly. But with that, let's go ahead and go into our updates for today. We're going to start off with a state and local cybersecurity grant program update. Come on down. We'll talk with our CISO, John Israel, for that update. And I will pass it to you.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair and members. For the record, my name is John Israel. I'm Assistant Commissioner and Chief Information Security Officer for the state working for Minnesota IT Services. As Chair Bonner mentioned, I'm here to kind of present an update on the state and local cyber grant program and a few other related efforts that MNIT is undertaking currently to kind of help the Commission raise some awareness about the steps in the process we are in. The state and local cyber grant program, as a refresher for folks, is related to the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act funding from the federal government that was provided in the 2021 and is released and provided through CISA, the Cybersecurity Information Security Agency, and FEMA to the state. Minnesota is eligible is eligible for $18 million in federal money over the 4-year program period of performance. And so once we add the state matching funds that the legislature appropriated this last session, that brings us to about $23.5 million that will raise and improve cybersecurity for local governments throughout the state. The process when we last spoke was we're working towards the approval process for the statewide plan that is a required component of this grant program. That was successfully completed and submitted in July. That is the version and the information that CISA needed in order just to say, yes, Minnesota is meeting the required elements and is ready to move forward. Since that time, we have completed and worked with our cybersecurity task force to complete what we're calling the whole estate plan. So this is a whole estate cybersecurity plan for Minnesota that is targeted to help our constituents, both the participating entities, so those local governments, state local governments, tribal nations, K-12 education schools, higher education, others that are eligible for the funding, helping them understand their role and ability to access this grant program to improve their cybersecurity, as well as information for all Minnesotans to understand the work that the state is undertaking to improve the cybersecurity program. To date, and I'm excited to kind of announce, you're getting a little bit of a preview here, is that whole estate plan is getting launched tomorrow. So this time tomorrow, this will be out in the news and available to the public. Anybody will be able to review both that whole estate plan, both the guide for Minnesotans, as well as that participants guide, helping local governments understand what to do. So I'd like to kind of encourage people to watch the news for that. We're going to be launching that on MNIT's website tomorrow morning, and encourage that if you've got contacts with local government entities that might be eligible, to ensure that they're aware. We're working from the MNIT perspective to spread the news far and wide as much as we can to make sure they're understanding what the next steps are for them to raise their hand and say they'd like to participate. But this, we encourage others to kind of help us spread that word as well. The next steps that will happen once that plan is released is we are also at the same time releasing a survey. This is the first step that any local government entity will take in order to raise their hand to say they'd like to participate. That gets them engaged with the task force, engaged with the opportunities that are coming available, and then over the next few months, we'll be rolling out solution services and additional projects to help implement the items that are called out on that whole estate plan. So as these are, this will be essentially a rolling window that'll be launching starting tomorrow. So we're excited about that next step. Just as kind of a reminder, I think I've spoken about this in many venues. I believe I spoke about it here, so I apologize if it's a little bit repetitive, but just kind of highlighting the four main goal areas of that state and local whole estate plan that the task force has created. One was kind of maturing those cyber capabilities. So kind of looking at local governments that are eligible, tribal nations, schools, others, and looking and meeting them where they are in their cybersecurity program. Recognizing that there's a vast difference from some entities that may be quite small and have very foundational or very minimal cybersecurity controls in place to very advanced organizations that have invested and have full-time IT and cybersecurity staff. So meeting those organizations where they are and helping raise the bar of cybersecurity for all those organizations. Second one is helping organizations reduce risk by leveraging existing programs. So I believe in prior sessions we've spoken about the statewide security monitoring initiative. That's a program that MNIT has provided through a different federal grant program for about the last 10 years that it's helped provide advanced cybersecurity controls and protection successfully to county governments, tribal nations, and port cities. We've got 100% of counties subscribe to at least a portion of that program. It's been very successful, and we're looking to leverage the things that we've learned from that to expand those programs for other local entities that are now eligible under this new grant program. Third is collaborating and sharing information. So really looking at how we can expand the threat intelligence analysis, how we can get all of the local government entities engaged with our threat intelligence partners and engaged with learning, understanding those cyber threats, and also get them comfortable with knowing they've got access to people that they can call in times of a crisis to get help and report cyber events. So kind of really building that threat collaboration throughout Minnesota. And then finally, preparing and planning for cyber events. So looking at working with critical infrastructure providers, specifically those that are eligible, which would be municipal and other local government entities that are providing water and wastewater services and other kind of critical resources to their residents, working and partnering with them to prepare, plan for cyber events, to assess and enable more capable foundational baseline cybersecurity controls for those entities. Additionally, I wanted to cover a little bit because just raise some awareness. We highlighted a little bit of this, I think, in a previous session, but the appropriation the legislature gave to MNIT for cybersecurity. So the legislature this last session appropriated $32 million to MNIT over the next 4 years to improve and raise cybersecurity controls throughout the executive branch, so really focused on the state entities that MNIT supports. We broke, that funding is broken out into four main categories. The first one is that state match for the state and local cyber grant program I just spoke about. So that's one chunk of that funding. that is helping move that federal money, 18 million of federal money into 23 million. So that 5.5 million of federal match that we're required to provide to access the federal funding. That was the first bucket. The second one was really focused on advanced cybersecurity enhancements throughout state government. I'll highlight those in a moment. Third one is updating and modernizing our constituent identity and access management system. So that's that the way that we're validating the identities of our residents, constituents, and others that are accessing statewide systems, looking at how we modernize and take the legacy system that has served us well for a number of systems and put that on steroids and grow that into the identity solution of the future to help better provide better security, better telemetry, better fraud detection, and other kind of components through that investment. And then finally, the fourth is really focused on that statewide network, the MNIT, the Minnesota Network for Enterprise Telecommunications, that wide area network that MNIT provides that connects all counties and many other local government entities throughout the state to each other, and also provides them internet access and access to kind of critical technology resources. There's the final investment is really focused on giving us better visibility so that MNIT teams can better support and also better monitor from the security perspective events that are happening to any of those customers, any of those entities that are using that MNET network. On that cybersecurity advancement, that's the biggest bucket of that appropriation. Really, we're focused on 6 different program areas that we're focused on, and that's how we've built out the funding plan and kind of our efforts really to kind of modernize our security operations center, our vendor risk management program, our governance risk and compliance program. Each of those is allowing us to do an assessment, and while those teams and those functions work well today, we're looking to the future. Where do we want to be in 3 years? So that during that 4-year life cycle, that plan, we can look at how we want to update, grow, and modernize those tools and those capabilities to make the most use of automation and provide the most visibility to allow our teams to quickly detect, respond, and react to cyber events before they can become an incident or become a breach. Really kind of helping to amplify those existing programs that are working well today, but we know that need to evolve for the future. Our fourth program area is around zero trust architecture. And zero trust is kind of a little bit of a buzzword, but it is that journey that we're encouraging all organizations to undertake to move to that point of being able to rather moving from the old school version of kind of trust but verify to we never trust, we always verify. We make sure that only the right people have access to the right tools and the right applications and the right data at the right times, and always verify that. That's a journey that never ends, but this investment is giving us a significant effort to kind of modernize and push the state down that zero trust roadmap and move us down the journey. The fifth area is our program areas around our web application firewall service. So really amplifying and rolling that out to all systems. This is one of those areas that we grew very rapidly in the wake of the civil unrest in 2020. Saw very much success in using these kind of applications and this kind of tooling to defend against DDoS and advanced web application attacks. We do have this on many of the major systems. This funding is going to allow us to get that onto all critical systems and all systems that MNIT supports throughout the executive branch and amplify that service. And finally, the final program is around our cybersecurity program enhancement. So really looking at making sure that we're able to invest this money wisely, that we're able to deliver all these programs effectively, and most importantly, doing that efficiently. So looking at how we do that and helping us support those programs in this rollout. Finally, I was going to just kind of mention and highlight one of the areas that is kind of one of the key parts of our program, and that's our identity credentialing and access management. So really, this is our program that really focuses on recognizing that MNIT is going through such a digital transformation that's trying to support all the needs of citizens of Minnesota. We're providing access to an increasing number of applications online, providing access to an increasing amount of data online, and those are all fantastic efforts. But recognizing that digital data and needing to manage and control the access to those is kind of a critical key component of our program. So this ICANN program works under multiple pillars. Really helps deliver on our strategy to deliver secure, reliable technology solutions, but follows a number of pillars here, including one focusing on our workforce. the employees of the state that are working on the applications that they need, how we manage the life cycle of those employee accounts from the moment that they join employment to the point that when they depart, and making sure that we're managing and constantly reviewing and renewing that access to ensure that only the right access is granted to the right people at the right time. Managing privileged access, those employees that need access to advanced administrative tools, making sure we're managing those privileged accounts appropriately, and so secure authentications, as well as looking at those kind of technology, non-human kind of accounts, those things that are systems and others that behave, that don't actually have a human or a person behind those keyboards. Those are still identities that we need to manage and take through the life cycle. Our contractors and vendors, and then finally our constituents and our partners, those partners that we work with outside the state, and strategic vendors and others that help us deliver those last mile services to residents. There are a number of areas around this program. I won't go into all the details today. I know we're limited on time, but I wanted to just kind of highlight that's a key part of our program. We're glad to kind of come back and do a deeper dive on that in the future. I'll pause there if there's any questions.
All right. Members, do we have any questions for the commissioner? Apparently, you're doing a fantastic job.
I appreciate that.
So we will let you go ahead and continue if you like.
I'm gonna pass this to Deputy Commissioner Eichten
Okay,
for this next
fantastic.
portion.
Well, welcome, Deputy Commissioner. We will let you take off where Commissioner Israel left off. And I believe we're next on our advancing emergency preparedness. Or are you doing the update?
I think if we read the agenda right, we were gonna do the critical IT
Critical, I'm
projects.
sorry.
Okay.
Wasn't sure.
We're
All right.
flexible.
Now, let's go ahead and jump into the update for critical IT projects for Minnesota. I thought it would be good to give folks in the room just sort of a quick update on where we're at with some of those critical things that we funded in this last session.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members, for the opportunity to provide some high-level updates, and I'll preface with happy to answer any questions the committee may have, or circle back if there are particular initiatives you want to dive a little deeper on. But I think, as we all know, a number of major IT initiatives were passed last session. The majority of them are sort of not ancillary, that maybe minimizes it, but are coupled with major business, initiatives, new programs, new initiatives, new agencies being created from kind of whole cloth new, or from parts of other agencies that are being reorganized. So I'll try and touch high level on a host of those initiatives, but as I said, happy to answer any questions that the committee may have. So sort of looking across the portfolio of initiatives, they're in various stages of progression, I would say, ranging from planning phases to procurement phases to phases around just staffing up and resource onboarding. So I'll start with the Office of Cannabis Management. We expect to sign either today or tomorrow a contract with a licensing system provider. This is a provider that's been successful in multiple other states and major cities, particularly on the West Coast and in sort of the West Mountain region. We did approach that procurement from an invitation to negotiate standpoint, or using that approach. It came down to two vendors who we felt could ultimately deliver for us on what was needed. And ultimately one did prevail from a cost perspective, and so that work will move forward. We do not yet have a Office of Cannabis Management Director who's been appointed, but we are working with the staff at the Department of Agriculture, as well as some of the transition leadership, to make sure that the IT side of the house is moving ahead on the pace that it needs to move, even if some of those business decisions and rulemaking work has yet to occur. There's a lot that we can do now before and avoid rework, right? Things that we can do that do not have dependencies on some of those rulemaking decisions. So we did issue an RFP, I believe the day the bill was signed. So we made sure we were ready to go because we do recognize that there's going to be a lot of public interest in how that timeline proceeds. Next up on the DHS modernization transformation front, at this stage, DHS governance processes are underway to prioritize enhancements, leveraging that new funding. It's my sense they're gonna need to balance kind of a host of needs in terms of how they prioritize use of those dollars, ranging from federal compliance initiatives, system improvements that would benefit county caseworkers, system enhancements that would enable more self-service transactions and services to be accessed online. That would hopefully result in less need for caseworker intervention. There's real need to balance this enhancement work, I would say, with other priorities that are gonna be going on over the next year, including the public health emergency unwind, where folks who have been on public health care programs for some number of years during the public health emergency need to come back and provide paperwork, update information to redetermine their eligibility. And so we are working with those DHS governance processes to understand which of those needs is going to be prioritized at the top of the list by DHS, the counties, MNSHR, and others who are engaged in those governance processes. So more to come in terms of those priorities and work ongoing as it relates to that public health emergency unwind with some new guidance coming down from the feds that will, I think, continue to impact our priorities and our work. On the Department of Corrections front, we have engaged with Gartner Consulting to help establish the program for the modernization transformation effort for DOC, establish governance around that program, the data strategy related to the initiative. An RFI is expected this fall to get a fuller picture of corrections products that are available in the marketplace, and the initial modernization strategy will focus on the core offender management system for the DOC. So you're one of a small number of states that has not yet moved to a COTS, commercial off the shelf or software as a service type solution for our core offender management system. So expect that we will be moving in that direction as so many other states have, and then innovating, I would say, around the margins of that core solution to accommodate some of the uniqueness of the state of Minnesota, our programming, our focus on education, and reduction of recidivism. Pivoting to the MDE front, the summer food program IT work was successfully delivered and completed ahead of the school year, so participating districts do have that opportunity to participate. As a parent of a first and a second grader, I was really happy to see that was stood up in time. And that our kids are able to go to school and we don't have to worry about packing a lunch or giving them money. So sorry, a little bit of opining there. Pivoting to paid family medical leave and the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. These two are at similar stages within the last few weeks. We onboarded dedicated systems architect resources for both of those efforts to begin some critical planning work for business and system architecture. Also, an RFI was issued not long after session to get a clear picture of what the market options are for paid family medical leave that are in use in other states. So there are a few different paths available to go down there, but expect an RFP to come in the future here. I wouldn't want to commit to a timeline, as the paid family medical leave director will be starting in about 10 days here. So we expect to work with that individual to set out a firm timeline for RFP issuance for, one or both the collections and the benefits side of the paid family medical leave system. I will also share, I don't believe these were put into law last session. They were a little bit longer term in development, but kind of on a similar implementation, modernization, critical IT project front related to DNR. Contracts were recently signed for two major projects, so the Parks and Trails Reservation System and the DNR e-licensing system. This is the system for things like hunting, fishing, permits, licenses, deer tags, recreational vehicle licenses. That contract was entered into with a firm S3, which is a subsidiary of Payet, who works with other states similarly. And this really presents an opportunity for the state of Minnesota to put in place mobile hunting and fishing licenses, online hunter safety registration, and the like. So it's a new vendor, new opportunity for some capabilities that we haven't had in place before on the mobile front in particular, is where I expect a lot of that priority and focus to be put. On the internal front, so those proposals that were moved forward by MNIT, as opposed to our business partners, that, the MNIT proposals are intended to benefit the whole of the enterprise as opposed to a particular agency. John covered the cybersecurity investment. That was one of three sort of major investments. The other one is the Technology Modernization Fund, or Application Modernization Fund. It's been referred to as. We have rolled out internal proposal processes for that modernization fund. Again, that one is $40 million over 4 years. We've had 20 proposals already submitted. We've established a modernization steering team that includes state agency leaders from across the enterprise, business leaders, not MNIT leaders, but business leaders, to help govern and make selection decisions around how those dollars should be leveraged. Again, 20 proposals in. That steering team we've met with twice to help them understand their role in program portfolio oversight. These are assistant commissioners, deputy commissioners from across the enterprise, helping them understand their role in reviewing, recommending projects to be funded, and then working with us along the way to monitor the progress of those projects to ensure that they are successful, or to intervene if we see a project that is not on track, and if we need to even go so far as to claw back funding back to the fund away from that project so it can be used on another effort. I will say this modernization fund proposal, having an enterprise fund, an enterprise level portfolio, is just a different approach than anything we've had in the past. We've talked to several other states, the state of California, Connecticut, the federal government, about how they govern similar type funds, how they make their selection decisions, what they require from a department or a business unit in order to successfully make it through that funding process. It's been illuminating, and it's validating that we're on the right track. But we also want to use this as an opportunity to sort of model from a best practice standpoint what portfolio governance can and should look like, so that we can then sort of replicate that model down to an agency-based level if they have a similar sort of agency-level modernization fund or pool of dollars that they're working to allocate in a way that optimally maximizes the business value associated with the investment and reduces the risk of failure to deliver. Similarly, across all of these initiatives, there is a layer of portfolio management and best practice that we are looking to apply from our Office of Transformation and Strategy Delivery and the Product and Agile Center of Excellence. You might hear us refer to as PACE. So I know I'm throwing out a lot of terms right now, but what I'm trying to say is that we're looking to use this really historic level of investment to drive home and implement changes in the ways that we work that ultimately will improve the chance of success. So this is things like effective stakeholder engagement, human-centered design, agile delivery methods. So not multi-year, big bang efforts that have significant risk associated with them, but rather more incremental approaches that are iterative in nature, that involve the stakeholders and the users in these systems from the beginning and throughout the life cycle of development of the product. And then ultimately ensuring that at that most critical moment, that go live point, before we do need to roll ahead with a major initiative, that everyone involved, be it the business side, the IT side, is ready for that change, ready for the ramifications of what that will mean in terms of business processes, clear around ownership of who's accountable, who's responsible for what. And that just involves a level of communication and collaboration that through that Product and Agile Center of Excellence, we're looking to move forward and to educate as many leaders across the executive branch as we can We have a great partnership with Ann O'Connor in the governor's office, who is leading up efforts on the implementation front, who's been hosting workshops with leaders across the enterprise to help them understand, their role and their responsibility in moving these ahead. It is really, the backdrop, I would say, of the whole executive branch right now is working to get our arms around what it's going to take to deliver on the outcomes that were promised via these historic investments. And I would say that there's an air of excitement and commitment to truly realize what has been envisioned. But that is going to take time. It's going to take work. If there are roadblocks that we end up encountering, we will come back to the legislative body for any changes that are needed to overcome those roadblocks. But at this stage, we have not encountered any roadblocks. That said, we're early in the planning, procurement, and staffing phases. And so you certainly have our commitment to keep you up to speed along the way in whatever venue it is, whether it's the Cyber Commission or any other committee, because ultimately we're all together accountable for success. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions the committee may have and appreciate the opportunity.
Yes. First, I will take a point of privilege and say thank you, Deputy Commissioner. I know that when talking to other states, there are states who are a little bit envious of Minnesota in terms of the maturity and where we're at, and just the commitment that we have to approaching these challenges for the future head on, as well as, sort of the opportunities that come along with that. So I'm really grateful that we're already doing this work and that we're moving ahead and positioning ourselves as leaders on this issue. So I'm really grateful to everyone at MNIT, and I hope that you are singing that and sharing that at every meeting and every opportunity. We are just so grateful for all that work. With that said, I know some of us did hear some pieces of this in the TAC meeting as well. Are there any questions on anything for the Deputy Commissioner? Senator Coran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Aitken, I appreciate you giving the update on the cannabis, and I'd love to, at some point, as we move along in our procurement, of course, I'm a massive proponent of the invitation to negotiate. I think it's good. It was my first question to you if you wouldn't have mentioned it. Thank you. Because I do think it's a way that we all win, our users, the agency of need, and the vendor community who provides that service. Question on DHS modernization. So that's a beast, probably the biggest beast we have. It currently has 4 systems. Would love your thoughts if the work you're starting on now, does that look like? I've been out of that vendor community for a bit to understand if somebody's done all of it well, or 2 companies are doing divided all of it well. What does that look like? And then tell me about what we're going to do differently on the engagement side from the counties. Because it was very unique. As you know, the experience over the last 3 years, at least in my role in this, is that they came to us and said, please do not fund it. That was their request, because they didn't believe there was an investment or a commitment, because they've done this before and they can hardly take more help, to relearn. So what I'm curious on is, we've talked about it a lot, but I want to see not the conversation of user stakeholder engagement, because we've always done that. But I'm still looking for the technology side, the MNIT side, to engage and actually go out and learn the user interfaces and the jobs of all the users. The counties are at the end of the food chain here. And the more we add challenges to them, that's a cost that's borne right on the local tax levy, not all borne by the state. So it was a unique position that they were not bought in. Are they bought in today? I'm not sure they're bought in today, but I'd love to figure out what is that we're actually going to do differently in that engagement. And every time I've asked about when is MNIT going to go out and work and learn those jobs, the answer's been, we're not. But we're going to ask them. And so I've just wanted, if we're going to, I know we have the right intentions, but I really want to go and do something new and unique. And until the technology side learns the business side, I don't think we'll have truly collaboration and true buy-in by all the users you need to be successful. So that's my key point, and interest about what we are going to do differently. But if you could touch on both of them briefly, is that kind of it's 4 large, massive systems today. Does our preliminary work, does it look like, could we get to 1? Or what do we think that looks like? Can it even be consolidated from the 4 to 1, 2, or 3? And then, kind of what are we going to do on this stakeholder engagement around the county? Because it's probably our largest project we're going to engage in from a cost and effort perspective.
Deputy Commissioner, I know that was a lot.
It's a lot, as it always is.
And certainly, there's always questions about right-sizing stakeholder engagement and, of course, how we do things more efficiently, effectively. But I'm going to let you kind of answer and give your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair, Senator Coran. To the question first of the county buy-in, right? I can't speak for every program. I can't speak for every service area that involves collaboration between DHS and the counties, and there's a large number of those. I can say I am the co-chair of the METS Executive Steering Committee. So we meet actually this body or by statute in either the Senate building or the state office building every quarter. The last meeting that we had, the counties came forth with a question to the committee about when will the dollars related to METS enhancements, which I'm guessing is the one you were perhaps visiting with county folks at some time ago around, when will the priorities be set for those dollars? And advocating for those priorities to include caseworker enhancements, so things that will make the caseworkers' lives easier. Now, that is an important priority, but it can't, I don't think could be the only priority, right? There's also the priority of the clients themselves and their experience and their pain points throughout the process. Then there's the fact that ultimately, these programs are regulated by federal partners who are sometimes prone to change or clarify their requirements of us. And so we need to stay in compliance with those expectations so that the federal money continues to flow down to the state for those programs. Then there are changes as well that improve our own internal operating efficiency and how well we can do our work, how much we can trust its effectiveness, and just how many folks it takes to do the work. All of these things are important. It's really challenging to pick one priority over the other. That is the hard work of governance. And for the most part, the hard decisions our business partners need to make, and we need to empower them with as much information as we can about what option A versus B versus C would look like and what the risks associated with it would be, so that they can make the best decision possible in a tough priority setting exercise. I will say that, while the stakeholder engagement piece, I think it's even bigger than that, and I would point to 2 efforts in particular. One would be the child care licensing effort, which is the first major product management pilot early adopter effort from DHS, as well as the MN Benefits initiative. And in both those cases, it was beyond stakeholder engagement. It was stakeholder inclusion and involvement in the process, that showing back of work along the way, keeping them informed about the direction we're headed so that they can help us fine tune or make adjustments along the way. It's a different cultural approach than we've taken in the past. It can require more time from our DHS business partners in terms of that engagement, but ultimately the value that gets returned. I was just had a One Minnesota Goal Lead cohort meeting with the OIG leader, and she mentioned home child care providers or center-based child care providers saying, it was through this project, this licensing project, that you restored my faith in government, that government can deliver, can make things easier for us. Those are the types of experiences that, make it all worthwhile and are why we're doing what we're attempting to do. But, to kind of come back to your first question around, the major systems, yes, there are those major ones. There's PRISM, SSIS, MMIS, METS, Avatar. It's more than 4, but it is, the major ones are probably in the neighborhood of 10 to 15. So I don't see getting down to 1 I actually think that may constrain us more than it liberates us from some of those legacy constraints that we've been dealing with over the last few decades. But there are market solutions out there that range from, you know, full end-to-end services to SaaS services to COTS products that we can buy and configure and implement on our own. I think all of that has to be on the table. My sense from DHS leadership is that all of that is on the table, because when you put, you know, the customer at the center, that's what it requires, is that the state statutes, the business processes, the legal interpretation of those regulations and statutes all needs to be brought together with the technology in order to make the best possible decision for the client. And I think that the culture work that's been led by Commissioner Harpstead, the work emerging from the Technology Advisory Committee about how the state should approach these efforts, it's working, right? It's helping to change that culture, but again, it will take time to permeate across all of the Department of Human Services. I think that some of the reorganization efforts in terms of, you know, DCT will help them be able to focus a bit more on where they want to go related to a smaller set of services. And, you know, we on the minute side, yes, we're the IT department, but we're also looking to bring, you know, those best practices that exist in that gray area between business and IT up to the fore and help educate and bring about the cultural change that we all, you know, you, Senator Correa, and Representative Bonner and I spend a lot of time talking about in the Technology Advisory Committee. So I think we're on the right track. I think leaders are bought in, and now is the hard work of kind of organizational change management and systems change that includes not just, you know, one agency, but multiple agencies and even entities outside of state government as well.
Madam Chair.
Okay. Senator Cran.
Thank you, Commissioner Aiken. I agree with everything you said. The examples that you highlighted are great, but they're fairly simplistic compared to the complex decision-making tree. And you described them very well of the challenges federal government, right, and all of those things that impact health and human services. But the real work is the complexity in the decisioning tree, bringing all that together, because you're serving the single client, and the counties are it. And when we talk about customer, it's every single one of them. And everywhere we go, there's the agent, you highlighted, the agency. In many cases, we didn't even learn or help our own agencies figure out what their needs are. And it goes to that investment. And so I just want to see us to do some really fun things. I think everybody can actually have a lot of fun. And when we reach that point, we will have much better outcomes at a much lower cost and a more stable base and serve everyone better. So that's what I'm always interested in. So how can we do it better? And walking through those scenarios, and I'll continue to ask that question until we get to the other side. So thank you.
Thank you for that. And thank you, Deputy Commissioner. I know it is a complex and daunting challenge, but I do appreciate the fact that we are really focused on how we change that customer experience for all of our stakeholders, and how we do that. And Senator Wicklund, did you have a comment quick?
Yeah, just a question. You mentioned that for the new program, the paid family or paid medical family leave program, and the new Department of Children, Youth, and Families, that you've hired system architecture folks. Are those resources then, are they Minute person or within the Minute agency? And then do they incorporate like cybersecurity principle integration of those principles into the design that work that's going on for those and other entities? But those were the two you mentioned that had new hires.
Yes, Madam Chair, Senator Wicklund. So both of those hires, very recent, just within the last few weeks, actually, would be Minute hires. So they are system architect positions, which is one of it's our highest individual contributor position. So they're not in a management role; they're in an individual contributor role. But they really, it's a challenging role. You work across delivery teams, security, service delivery, operations. and then closely with the business architecture function to help set, okay, how is the business going to work? How will work flow through the system? And then how do the IT systems need to be sort of, I mean, to use the word again, architected, right? Structured and associated with different aspects of the business operations in order to work most effectively and most efficiently. So even coming down to things as far as a host of systems that are right now in the DHS domain, decisions need to be made about, will they remain on that domain? Will they move to a new domain with the Department of Children, Youth, and Families? How will access be governed to that system if it is being used by multiple agencies? So that gets at sort of the security side of your question. And so these roles span really across application development, application support, and general IT operations, and they require someone with a depth of experience in kind of all sides of that fence in order to do the work most effectively. So yeah, these are definitely technical roles that will exist on the minute side, and they will interface with security and quite intimately, I would say.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Senator Wicklund and Deputy Commissioner, and thank you for your time today on that particular topic. With that, I think we're going to move next, if it's all right with you, to a quick update on the state work group on AI, which is sort of adjacent to our topic here, from Representative Elkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so there are a few of us, Representative Nash, you and I are all on a on National Conference of State Legislators Commission on, started out as cybersecurity and then it turned into cybersecurity and data privacy, and then now it's turned into cybersecurity, data privacy, and artificial intelligence. And the topic of artificial intelligence has been kind of front and center at NCSL more generally as well. There was an AI session at the summit last month, I guess, that was very well attended, literally standing room only in an open room. So very large room. So there's a bunch of people who are members of that committee who are working on that, both within the context of that committee, and then there's kind of a smaller group of the real red hots on the issue that you and I are a part of, that is is going to be hosting a series of learning sessions, because I think, as I characterized at the TAC meeting on Friday, most of us are at the position of where we're learning what we need to learn. So that's the purpose of this. But all legislators are welcome to join that group as well. And also anyone any legislator who wants to be a member of the formal NCSL group, all it requires is an appointment, which is available for the asking from your legislative leadership. So if you want to join that initiative as well. So. And it's just from my personal perspective, based on what I've learned from my learning so far, is that that I'd say that the biggest areas of concern that are emerging are about the use of black box artificial intelligence to make important life decisions about whether you're going to get that apartment or what your car insurance is going to be and so on. So I think we need to be building in protections similar to what we have with respect to our credit scores through the Fair Credit Reporting Act federally. And then there's also, and this was discussed extensively at the Minnesota Digital Government Conference recently as well, the need that for generative AI type of applications that people who are consuming the content generated by generative AI need to have some visibility into the provenance of the data that was used to train the model. So. A big learning has been just that, because the technology will evolve so quickly, is that we need to be conscious of the need to focus on regulating the use cases rather than the technology itself, which is a general rule anytime you're legislating around technology.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Representative Elkins. And if we could maybe send some information to Nick about that specific group. So if there's other members here today who wish to join that group, they have some contacts to reach out to in order to join that group as well. With that, we're going to jump right into our schedule, and I want to try to, and I'm sorry, we're a little behind on our time, but I want to be respectful because I know we have, I think the deputy commissioner, Commissioner Israel is going to come up and get focus on the next piece around disaster recovery. And then we do have Major Peter Kapelansky, hopefully I'm saying that correctly, our commander from the Minnesota National Guard 177th Cyber Protection Team following that. So pretty excited to hear about that program as well. So we will go ahead and start off with you, Commissioner Israel.
Thanks, Madam Chair and members. Thanks for welcoming me back. I'll keep my remarks brief. I know we're just in reflection of the schedule. Again, give you a high-level overview and introduction so we can get to our other speakers this morning. So as we're talking about emergency preparedness, MNIT is the kind of the overarching goal of the state of Minnesota is really to make sure that we're prepared to sustain, restore government services in the event of a disaster, whether that's of any kind of nature, specifically whether that's a natural disaster or a cybersecurity event or any other kind of large-scale event that may impact services that the state provides to our residents and constituents. Really, and the focus of this is making sure we're able to do this in an effective, timely, safe manner, regardless of the type of event or incident. As with any other kind of event, this is a shared responsibility. MNIT has a piece of that with the IT component, but a disaster is typically much larger than IT and could spread into many other practices that involve the participation and partnership with entities throughout the state to respond. MNIT's role in this particular area is really around the area of kind of leadership, working with our chief business technology officers that are key IT leaders within each of their state agencies, working with our enterprise security teams, and then partnering with the leadership of that agency to ensure that they are aware, have created plans, and that we're able to quickly respond to any type of event. To that point, emergency preparedness has been kind of a key priority for this administration pretty much from the start. So in April of 2019, the governor issued two executive orders, Executive Order 19-22 and 19-23. Both of those were dated on April 4th of 2019. The first one really kind of focused on creating the Disaster Response and Recovery Council, DRRC, which meets at the call of the governor. This provides kind of cabinet level leadership in the event of in any kind of large scale event. My mind keeps focusing on cybersecurity, but this disaster response and emergency preparedness response is much broader than that. But really, the council provides that cabinet level leadership in the event of any kind of major events, recommends kind of supplemental appropriations that are needed to be included in disaster relief bills, helps communities recover from those disasters, and in accordance with Minnesota statute. As part of that order, each agency must designate a member of their staff to be as its emergency preparedness response coordinator, and each agency is responsible for kind of carrying out those emergency preparedness response planning, recovery, mitigation, et cetera, all of those different efforts. As part of Executive Order 19-23, each agency also carries out the continuity of government, continuity of operations plan, and other preparedness responsibilities, and also directs MNIT to create and establish an IT disaster recovery program that helps agencies align helps align disaster plans with agency priorities and recovery timelines that agencies set. And also in 2019, in October of that year, MNIT's commissioner issued a directive around disaster recovery planning, specifically calling out and directing kind of CBTOs, those agencies, IT leaders, to work with their state agency partners and their business teams to evaluate their priority one applications. And when we talk about priority one applications, we're talking about those most critical applications that that state agencies cannot do without, that need to be either operational all the time or need to be recovered within a 24-hour window. It's kind of those the most important of important systems that the state operates. Under that directive, the CBTOs will also identify those priority one applications that cannot be recovered within that recovery time objective of 24 hours or less, and then work with their agency business partners to identify the cost and implementation timelines that are needed to get those solutions and services to a point where they can be recovered within that time frame. CBTOs, also within that directive, they're working with the enterprise services teams to verify and document that their backups are performed, and then also working with their business continuity teams to list all the applications and partner with MNIT's disaster recovery team to kind of help document and record that into a centralized application. The timeline and progress is kind of, I've kind of hit the highlights, but really this is kind of existed for a period of time. So even before 2019, there was responsibility and engagement on disaster recovery and emergency preparedness. But I just kind of really wanted to call out MNIT's frame is in the slide I'm sharing within that red box, really focusing on that commissioner's directive, the implementation of our application portfolio management processes, which helps agencies identify and inventory all the applications that are operated, as well as those recovery objectives and those timelines that are needed, helping prioritize each of those applications to say whether that's those really critical priority one systems that need that immediate recovery all the way down to priority 4, which could take 30 days or more, that the agency could continue to operate without for an extended period if needed, helping to align the business needs with the kind of the application availability and cost, associated costs related to that. And then also with the implementation of our disaster recovery plan repository. So MNIT has been responsible for creating and developing and implementing the tooling that's needed to manage and store those disaster recovery plans to help agencies recover, both from that IT recovery side, where we obviously play a critical role in recovering the IT systems, as well as helping to document the recovery plans that are needed throughout the agencies. Looking kind of at the future, it's really focused on kind of that continuous improvement and benchmarking, kind of really just looking at continuing to focus on identifying and enhancing what we're doing with those priority one applications, and then integrating the tools and capabilities that are needed to effectively manage the ongoing planning, operation, testing of those plans, and looking at kind of those benchmarks and goals that are used by other institutions to see where we can continue to drive improvement. Preparedness as a whole is a continuum. So it's a never-ending process. You start with preparedness, kind of creating an inventory of those applications, the response, being ready and able to respond, and testing those response processes to ensure that we are able to quickly and decisively react to any kind of event, the recovery planning, as well as mitigation. I won't go into a lot of detail on this one, just in the interest of time, but for the moment, I'll turn it back to you, Madam Chair, and sit for questions if there are any.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly ask, thank you, Commissioner Israel. And looking at the slide here, under the August 2022 timeframe, it mentions that 62% of the plans are complete and up to date. Do we have any thoughts on the remaining almost 40%, 38% that are not complete and up to date, and what we need to do to get them caught up?
I don't have I can't speak specifically to which those are. I do know that this is a metric that we are tracking from our cybersecurity scorecard and working with those agencies to kind of continue to develop and test those plans. I think that's going to be a topic that I may have to get back to you on.
Sure.
On the specifics of that, but this is an ongoing effort. And as I said, this is a partnership between MNIT and those state agencies to really incorporate the planning effort and ensure that those are up to date and complete.
Thank you to Commissioner. And, you know, as an Agilist, you know, I'm always thinking about what are the barriers and how do we help overcome them to get folks where they need to be, and if there's anything that we can do to assist in that process. Obviously, I hope you will reach out and let us know. And with that, are there any other questions from any other members before we move on? No? All right. Continue.
Thank you.
And with that, thank you, Commissioner Israel. We're going to move on to Commander or Major Peter Kapelensky. Apologies, getting a little tongue-tied there. From the National Guard's 177th Cyber Protection Team, or CPT, to talk about that program. And I know this is one that a lot of us have had a keen interest in, and so we're excited to hear what you have to say.
Good morning,
Thank you, Major.
Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me. I'm Major Peter Kapelansky. I am the commander of the 177th Cyber Protection Team of the Minnesota Army National Guard. And this morning, I'll give you a briefing on our capabilities, our organization, and our potential uses in a state cyber incident response capacity. Here's my agenda for the day. I'll talk about the team. I'll talk about how we're employed in a doctrinal manner, talk about how we could be employed in state cyberspace activities, and finally, I'll talk about the State Cyber Coordination Cell, which is being established. So you'll see on the screen, this is the 177th federal mission and state mission. On order, the 177th Cyber Protection Team conducts mission prioritized, threat-focused, intelligence-driven, defensive cyberspace operations on specified terrain in cyberspace in response to ongoing or imminent threats as an integral part of the full spectrum of cyberspace operations in order to support mission partners. Now that's a lot, so I'll highlight a few things. So mission prioritized, there is more demand for cyber support than there are units available to fill it, so we are prioritized to the most important missions. Threat focused, the 177th and all of our cyber protection teams are not the network owners or the local network defenders for any specified network. We always act in a reinforcing capacity when there is an actual cyber incident or when there is a threat identified against a specific network. We're intelligence driven. We have a tie-in to national intelligence sources that help inform our response. And finally, defensive. We're a purely defensive cyberspace unit. We have a state mission as well, which is parallel to our federal mission. It's just conducted under state authority. Highlights from the unit timeline. The unit was established in 2017. In 2020, it was mobilized to Fort Meade as part of Task Force Echo 5 and returned in 2021. In 2022, the unit reached U.S. Cybercom's metrics for full operational capability. And then we're projecting another mobilization in a few years. The mobilizations are relevant because when the unit is federally mobilized, it is unavailable to support for any state missions. Just a few highlights of unit activities. Participated in the Minnesota election integrity efforts in 2019, the Task Force Echo mobilization to Fort Meade, which I mentioned, and then we've conducted a number of overseas training missions with our state partners in Croatia, and earlier this year in support of US AFRICOM in Italy and Morocco and Tunisia. Here's the basic structure of the cyber protection team. There's a small headquarters cell at the top in green. On the right side in blue, you see a support element which provides shared services, including threat intelligence. But the body of the team is 3 mission elements, each of which are 9 people. And the idea of the team is that each mission element can be activated independently or together to respond to cyber incidents at various scales. Command relationships of the unit, there is both a state chain of command and a federal chain of command. At the state level, we report up through the 34th Infantry Division to the Joint Force Headquarters, to the Adjutant General and the Governor eventually. Federally, we report to a battalion and brigade headquarters, which are both located in Virginia, and then up through our cyber to cybercom to the Secretary of Defense and the President. So these are my current priorities. My first priority is preparing the unit for our anticipated federal mobilization in several years. And there are several efforts related to that, including rebuilding the team's end strength, ensuring that the team is fully trained and equipped and validated next year. Right after that, priority number 2 is supporting any state or national cyber incident responses as ordered. And then the third priority would be any training events and tactical exercises that help prepare us for those missions. Moving on to cyber protection team employment. So the cyber protection team, as I've mentioned, is composed of 3 mission elements, and depending on the operational requirements of a given mission, we can be flexibly scaled up or scaled down. We can deploy a single mission element or multiple mission elements depending on the size of the incident. And the CPT employs a 4-step process. We conduct intelligence-driven hunt operations on key terrain to identify adversary activity. Then we counter and clear that adversary activity from the specified terrain. We work to harden that key terrain to prevent the threat from recurring. And finally, we assess the effectiveness of response operations and future risk to that key terrain so that we can make recommendations to the network owner so that they can further secure their system. Moving on to state cyberspace activities. So defense support to cyber incident response is contemplated as part of the overall label of defense support to civil authorities. When we're conducting these missions, we conduct them under the governor's authority, and we conduct them in obedience to the Minnesota Constitution and statutes, in addition to federal laws and federal policies that constrain our operations as well, particularly with regards to intelligence oversight. So over the past several years, the Minnesota National Guard has exercised its domestic operations and defense support to civil authorities in a variety of contexts. So we have an established playbook for conducting this, for example, with respect to flood response, winter storm response, and other types of missions which require National Guard to support to civil authorities. We have a process for this. I particularly want to highlight phase 1, shaping. These are all the activities that occur in preparation before an incident occurs, to establish relationships among the key players and establish templates and standard operating procedures. This is an area where some significant work needs to be done and where the state cyber coordination cell will have a key role to play, as I'll talk more about. There are some additional considerations when the National Guard cyber forces are employed for state operations. The National Guard has been used in other states for election support, and we were involved in a conference several years ago. Of course, there are, DoD has recognized that there are considerations about that, about public perception of having the National Guard related to election security. Federal equipment, the National Guard is permitted to use federal equipment to support its state missions, with the caveat that we do have to reimburse or replace any equipment that is expended. For federal security clearances, when we're operating in a state capacity, we do have restricted access to some of the intelligence products that we would normally employ when we're responding in a federal capacity. So that may limit our operations to some degree. We would not have access to top secret intelligence, only up to the secret level. Of course, we remain bound by federal criminal laws which constrain our activities. And I'll talk more about the memorandum of agreement on the next slide. So, were we activated for defense support of civil authorities, whether that would be for a state government entity or for a private sector critical infrastructure entity? We would need to establish a memorandum of agreement that provides the authority for us to operate, that would manage the expectations between the National Guard and that entity, provide us with our left and right limits so we understand what we're permitted to do and what we're restricted from doing on their network, establish procedures for how we would coordinate with them to make requests or recommendations, and finally, critically, establish liability for any unintended consequences of operating on their network. There are cost considerations when the National Guard is activated for state active duty status, then the state is the bill payer. We did a rough estimate on the full cyber protection team. Pay costs amount to about $9,000 per day. As I said, we can be flexibly scaled, so we could activate a smaller team for a smaller incident. And then there would also be per diem expenses if we had to travel. And then finally, there may be some equipment costs. We did a rough estimate if we had to replace some of our equipment, for example, if we were responding and we could not adequately protect sensitive information, for example, personal identifiable information or other sensitive information that was on our devices or as a result of responding to their incident, we may have to replace up to $16,000 worth of hardware was our estimate. So some historical data. To date, the 177th has not been activated to respond to any cyber attacks at the state or federal level. I did some research as to how often the National Guard is activated to respond to cyber attacks. The best information that I could find was a little out of date, but between 2018 and 2021, based on publicly available information, governors activated the Guard at least 41 times to provide support to state and local governments. That was looking at a total of 24 states, and about half of those activations were for ransomware incidents, mostly related to local government or the school system. About the other half were mostly related to election security. And then finally, I'll talk about the Cyber Coordination Cell. So this is an initiative that the National Guard brought forward and the legislature funded for this year to establish a 3-person cyber coordination cell within Joint Force Headquarters, reporting to the J3 Director of Operations. Currently, the Cyber Program Director hiring process is ongoing, and I expect that that should be announced relatively soon, who will be selected for that position. And then that person will conduct the hiring process for the 2 subordinate positions. So the C3 is not intended to be a cyber response force. It is intended to conduct planning and coordination and develop strategy to enable a more effective incident response in the future by setting the right conditions, establishing the right relationships. My relation to that, the 177th would be one of the possible maneuver forces that the Cyber Coordination Cell could recommend be activated in response to an incident. There are several other options, including under the Joint Force Headquarters J6, there's a defensive cyber operations element, and the Air Guard also has some cyber incident teams. The most important responsibilities of the Cyber Coordination Cell will be to cultivate and sustain working relationships with the various external agencies that would be involved in a successful incident response. That includes both federal agencies, including some that I've listed here, as well as state agencies, including MNIT. The C3 would also coordinate with other states for best practices and benchmarking purposes, and help manage our relationship with our state partnership program nations of Croatia and Norway to understand how they're conducting their cyber operations. The C3 would coordinate, as I said, with MNIT and the J6, who are the network owners for Minnesota's civilian and military networks respectively, to pre-coordinate regarding likely missions, establish templates, standard operating procedures, and identify any other private sector critical infrastructure and key resources that would possibly be in scope for incident response. And overall, they would be involved in establishing the escalation procedures for how those entities would request support from the National Guard and be involved in the process with the executive branch of determining what the most effective tool available to the state to respond to any particular incident, whether that is the National Guard or whether another tool in the toolbox would be more effective in any given specific case. Pending any questions from the committee, that concludes my brief.
Thank you so much, Major, for that overview. I really appreciate it. And with that, I want to start with, do we have any members that have questions? Senator Wickland.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. It was really informative. I'm wondering if you can comment on, it looks like you have a small number of personnel that are going to be hired. Do you have any other information on the timeline for the implementation once the team is established in terms of, I mean, in order to make this, able to respond to an incident, you need all these things established, and I'm just wondering, do you have any sort of sense of the timing for establishing that, all of these items?
I'm sorry, Senator, I don't have an estimate of how long it would take to establish these programs and bring them up and running. That would be one of the first responsibilities of that program, would be to establish what the timeline is, what the plan of action is, to establish all of those relationships and get everything in place.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like it will be a valuable tool and to have this available, and I'll be anxious to hear more as that person gets going and, and does create some of the framework so that we can understand, when it would be possible to take advantage of this. So, thank you.
Thank you. It'd be great to get an update on that when possible, Major. I appreciate that. Do we have any other questions from any other members? Otherwise, I have a couple. All right. One of the interesting parts is, we talk a lot about cybersecurity in general and how we bring up sort of the talent and the folks to do this work. It's really critically important work for our state, for our nation. Locally, you mentioned having some ability to intervene and assist local school districts, local municipalities and things like that. Obviously, election security is a prime concern as well, but we do see a lot of ransomware continuing to happen on the state and local levels. And I'm just curious if you could tell us a little bit about how you select and sort of recruit folks for the 177th.
Absolutely. So we do have some minimum standards that they all have to meet. We do have to send every potential applicant to a federal board that's based at the Cyber Center of Excellence that screens them and approves any candidates who want to transfer into the cyber branch to ensure that they meet those standards. We do try to cast a very broad net within the Minnesota Army National Guard to ensure that we are bringing in all of the best applicants, including from some non-traditional backgrounds. The cyber branch was largely established out of elements of the Army Signal Corps, which is basically the Army's IT branch, as well as the Military Intelligence Corps. But we've also had quite a number of recruits who came to us with interesting backgrounds from armor or infantry or various other branches who had either civilian cyber degrees or were simply hobbyists who had lots of interest and an aptitude to learn. So we want to make sure we're casting a net that can bring in all of those people. And then once they're on the team, the cyber branch has significant required training. Some of the longest schools in the military are for the cyber branch. Some of them are nearly a year in length for the advanced individual training and the officer basic courses for those positions. Then there are a multitude of additional courses that soldiers can take to specialize in particular functions as host analysts, network analysts, critical infrastructure analysts, threat intelligence. So there's a great deal of training that is involved, and that is one of our challenges, is the length of the training pipeline.
Thank you for that, Major, and I really appreciate that. I know we continue to have conversations at the state level about how important those positions are out in the private sector or on the state level. And certainly, I know that we have some really incredible resources within our ranks of the National Guard that are kind of helping fill some of those gaps and bring folks up. And I really appreciate you speaking to sort of how we collectively look for really great candidates who are passionate about doing this work and keeping things safe and secure. So I really appreciate that. The other question I had is, and I'm going to ask you to do something that's probably not the most comfortable for you, but I'm just curious your personal take on ways in which you think the 177th might be able to add value or more opportunity here in the state to really flesh out both our critical IT resources, but also to be of service to state and local partners. And again, this is a hypothetical question, so I realize that that's not something you get very often, but would just love to hear your thoughts on ways in which we might be able to better partner with the 177th.
So as I mentioned, our primary mission is incident response, but also as part of that, we do have the capabilities to advise the supported entity on hardening to prevent future incidents and on assessing their procedures and making recommendations for how they can improve their operations to conduct them more securely. Those types of activities we can conduct proactively, not in response to a specified incident, if the need is identified. And I think that's where the C3 will be important. As those relationships are established, we'll have more inputs coming in as to what those opportunities are, what agencies are in need of support, and just be better able to identify those opportunities. Because we do have an interest in forging stronger relationships. For example, one of the exercises that we conduct most years is called Cyber Shield. This is a national level cyber exercise that every year most states send their cyber detachments to. And as part of that, many other state agencies are invited so that they can rehearse the cyber incident response process. In addition, private sector, critical infrastructure partners are invited as well so that the cyber protection teams can practice interacting with a supported private sector partner. We also have seen some instances from other states. For example, my headquarters in Virginia conducted a state-level cyber exercise that was one part a tabletop exercise where senior state-level leaders and agency heads and critical infrastructure partners conducted a tabletop exercise for a hypothetical cyber attack on, I believe is the energy sector was what they focused on. And then in addition to that, they conducted a state level cyber exercise where they partnered with that private sector partner to conduct on keyboard practice for how they would integrate in the event of a cyber exercise. So there are options there, and one of the key functions of the C3 will be to identify and arrange some of those opportunities.
Wonderful, thank you. And one last thing, I know that, well, this isn't necessarily directly, we obviously do not necessarily directly in the state recruit for the military, of course, but we do know that we have programs within the state sponsored like by MN Cyber, for example, that often look to attract talent from our military members who may have a real interest in areas like cybersecurity. And certainly, this is just a kind of a throwing this out there, but certainly if there's any ways in which we can have any influence or have some suggestions from you on how to better help facilitate that connection and bring those really passionate folks who are looking to get a more in-depth knowledge of and be a resource in the cyber area into those areas, we would certainly love to do that, because it is, for many of us in the state, a lot about how we raise that next generation of cyber leaders across the spectrum. And I know that our military has some incredibly passionate folks amongst their ranks who may be those next leaders across our state in both public and private roles. So really appreciate you taking the time out today, Major, to come speak with us. Before I close, is there any other additional questions that I did not cover that anyone would like to address?
I do.
Representative Elkins.
Two real quick things. One is that I was kind of expecting that we would get a report on the University of Minnesota's data breach this meeting. Kind of disappointed that we didn't, and wondering if there are plans to, hold a hearing on that in closed session the next time we get together, perhaps.
Thank you, Representative Elkins. Yes, we actually had discussed the possibility of doing that in this session. I know several members are interested in that topic. We were not able to get them here in time, but we do have assurances that we may be able to queue them up for the next meeting in November. And I thought what we might do for the November meeting is to have a number of topics focused around specifically education. I know we had an MDE breach, St. Paul Schools had an issue, and the University of Minnesota. So I thought we might try to group some of that core together to see where we might have overlap or gaps, and see specifically if there are ways in which we as state partners might be able to help facilitate that with our partners on the local level. Senator?
Just a comment. In addition, I think making sure that we have a chance to discuss and hear from the legislative auditor in terms of what our existing processes are. I understand there are existing processes of notification, and I'd like to understand better, how does that, or how could that better connect to maybe the Cybersecurity Commission or, some other way of notification for legislators.
Perfect, great. We will add that in and take a look and see if we can't ask them to come as well. I think that would be a really helpful addition, for sure. So yes, thank you. And I think you had one more point.
One more point is that I wanted to just say that I agree with everything that Senator Coran and Deputy Commissioner Eichten said about DHS. I think that's the one that I'm most concerned about as well. But on a lighter note on that, I had sat at lunch with Shireen Gandhi, who's DHS's representative on the Technical Advisory Commission, and I had this book with me, Recoding America, Jennifer Palka's book. And I'm going to give you my copy when we're done here, but this should be required of anybody who's anything to do with IT work, including legislators and people who work in our state agencies, work with IT in government. But I mentioned that to Shireen, and she said, oh yeah, Commissioner Harpstead is reading this herself, and she has assigned it as required reading to all of her deputy commissioners, which is a very good sign, because as I was reading through this, it was like, oh yes, this definitely would apply to DHS. This would definitely apply to DHS. So if you have not read it yourselves, get a copy of it and read it. It's amazing.
Fantastic. And if we could send that over to our friend Nick here, and maybe he can send that out to the group as well for reference, so folks know, I'll have all the information. If you'd like to check out that resource, that would be tremendous. Do we have any further questions or business for today before we close? All right, seeing none, we are adjourned.